Hey, this is gonna be my video presenting my ideas for structural and electoral reform in the United States with extra checks on the executive and uh, essentially a more democratic structure for uh, uh, for our country. So first, let's get to structural reform because, in addition to electoral reform, this is, in my opinion, just the structural reform I think would improve this country much for the better. After the midterms, if an absolute majority of members of Congress wish to remove the president from office, his vice president shall carry out the remainder of the term. So, in other words, Trump could be removed right now, and Mike Pence. Now, you can't remove the vice president, so you got to decide if you're the opposition party getting swept into power, at least in the House. That's where you're more likely. Even if you don't have a majority in the Senate, you can still remove the president if you have if you have over, currently it would be 270. So if you have over 270 members of Congress, then you can do it. Democrats have 230, I think 235 in the House. Republicans have 240, 253. Yeah, they've got 253. So Democrats could remove the president under this bill, but it would just go to Mike Pence. They can't put Nancy Pelosi in it. Otherwise, they would have to go to the only way they could get Nancy Pelosi in there is if they do the 3/5 majority. I mean, 2/3 majority in the Senate through the impeachment process, which is unlikely to happen. But just in case, if the president needs to go and the vice president is better, and they feel the vice president is better than the current president, the opposition party can make that determination as to the president or the vice president being the better choice to serve out the remainder of their term. Or even the current party in power, well, whoever has an absolute majority of members in Congress. 2/3 of the states can override federal law. I think this is very good law. Essentially, this could mean that the states that have some form of medical marijuana and recreational marijuana could basically overturn the scheduling of marijuana, basically making marijuana fully decriminalized and at a federal level, descheduled, at least from the current scheduling it's currently on a Schedule 1. It could be to whatever schedule, the most conservative states that would be needed to get to the 2/3 mark would want it to be. So, you've got however many people want it to be legalized, but then as much as you need to get to the 2/3 mark to actually change federal law, whatever that state or set of states' laws, whatever they want to happen, that's essentially going to be the new federal standard. Okay. The next piece of structural reform is that Congress has the sole authority over military conflicts overseas when there is no imminent threat to the homeland or allies, or to allies the Congress has directed the president to defend. So basically, this means the president can't just say, this really takes back this really enshrines, I think, it goes a little bit farther than the War Powers Act. It is basically reasserts Congress's sole authority over, to declare war. It reasserts that authority and really makes there no question as to whether the president can just go off with the military and do willy-nilly shit. It essentially kind of makes the War Powers Act constitutional, but also not, because there's no 60 and 48 hour periods that the president has to report to Congress. It just says that if the president does something without congressional approval where there is no immediate threat, then he violated the law, and basically he can be subject to impeachment for violating the Constitution. And yeah. Now, the only way he could potentially is allowed to, just do whatever he wants with the military is if there is an imminent threat to the homeland of the United States or certain allies the Congress has deemed equivalent to as if the homeland were being attacked itself. So whatever country they want to, or even region that they say, if it's attacked, if you need to defend this region at all costs, if things are going to the border, you have to defend it. So basically, yeah. Any place that the Congress says is equivalent to the homeland, if it were attacked, you need to be able to respond immediately with military force. That allows it to cover some of the geopolitical bases that I think people would by common sense agree to. And then I think this is a major one. During a lame duck session in all levels of government, power cannot be transferred but for a 3/4 majority in all chambers in the legislative body thereof. So, like with, I don't remember the specific powers that the Wisconsin legislature transferred, but in the lame duck session, while Scott Walker was still governor, the Republican legislature gave themselves a lot more power, gave themselves powers that the governor had, because, the opposition governor was just swept into office. So, that was a major power grab, and during a lame duck session. Now, under this bill, they would need a 3/4 majority to pass that. I doubt that was going to be able to pass with a 3/4 majority. They would need some Democratic votes. So yeah, I doubt that was going to happen. That was a major power grab. That shouldn't have happened. So stuff like that ain't going to be able to happen. And that's counties, all levels of government, so city council, county commission, whatever it may be. That shit is you ain't gonna be able to do that, Scott Walker, no more. Once this provision is in the Constitution of the United States. When the president acts unilaterally without congressional approval, the Congress, with a simple majority, may nullify such action, not subject to veto. This and an accompanying provision, should the Congress delegate any authority, they may reclaim it with a simple majority, not subject to veto, executive approval, whatever. This is basically in reaction to, to some extent, when Congress voted to stop the arms sale, and to stop aiding Saudi Arabia, Trump just vetoed it. Even though it was a unilateral executive action that he was taking, Congress vetoed it. Congress disapproved of it, passed a law, and the president vetoed it. That should not be acceptable. When it comes to matters of foreign policy, if the Congress disapproves and it's part of their prerogative, the president has no freaking say in the matter. It should not be subject to a veto. The president must. The Congress can nullify any executive action that was not first passed by law. All right. Next, should the House of Representatives disapprove of a treaty or executive appointment, the Senate must approve such measure by a 2/3 vote. So, what this does is it gives the House some authority in the matter of, like, say, major appointments like cabinet officials and treaties. Now, ultimately, this makes the Senate the final decider, but it says, hey, we're not on board. So, the House isn't on board, so that means the Senate has to have, so that means the members of the Senate need to really consider, really need to think twice, and so they have a higher threshold they have to meet. But not all appointments are subject to this because, specifically, the next one, the Supreme Court nominees shall be subject to a 3/4 vote in the Senate and a simple majority in the House. Even a simple majority in the House would have to confirm a Supreme Court justice after it has been confirmed by the Senate. This is because Supreme Court justices are the Supreme Court of the land, the people. The House of Representatives is the people's house. The people should decide who is the highest court, who can be on the highest court in the land. That should not be just subject to the federal chamber. The people deserve a say in that important of an appointment. So we don't have someone who would lose in the people's house, frankly. And so, now, on to electoral reform. One major piece of electoral reform is regional voting districts that elect multiple members to the U.S. House and state legislatures. So this basically means there's going to be in each state there's going to be one gosh darn district, and that district is going to elect House members and state legislatures. It's going to be a multi-member. So now let's take a small state like Connecticut. They're probably just going to have one district, I bet you. Just one. Where it's going to be pretty much like Israel. It's going to probably be just one big darn district, and all the members of the House of the state legislature and the House of Representatives are going to be chosen from there. All right. And then you get to bigger states like Texas and California, where you're going to have multiple districts that elect multiple different members. You're probably going to have an LA district. You're probably going to have a San Francisco area district, a Bay Area district, Northern California, Southern California district, etc. You're going to have multiple of them that elect multiple members, okay? So that's going to be the major deal with that. Oh yeah, And the FEC, and then the next one is the FEC redraws districts and sends them to their respective states for approval. Now, the FEC, when it redraws districts, it's not going to be major changes. Pretty much, I mean, I would expect we'd probably need to make, depending on if anyone has suggestions to make that more definite. But it's probably, given that it's going to be large multi-member districts, the changes are probably going to be, pretty just minor tweaks around the edges so that they roughly have as close to about the same population in them. Like just, okay, if we cut, that's too many people. That district needs more people, this district needs fewer people, etc. So just tweaking the population count. But because it's a multi-member district, that really reduces the viability of gerrymandering effectively by a decent amount, by a significant amount. Then, for no more electoral reform, statehood for DC, American Samoa, Puerto Rico, Guam, Virgin Islands, and Northern Mariana Islands. So basically all the U.S. territories are states now. They get senators, they get X amount. They get senators, they get X, all the shit they could ever need. And that's how it should be. They deserve equal representation on the Hill, in my opinion. Merge the presidential party primaries anyway, into a national primary where the top two contenders with at least 40% of the delegates will advance. So you at least need two contenders with 40% each among them. Two contenders. And the top two contenders will move on to the general election, where basically everything's going to go down, and unlike now, I'm thinking we're going to probably break tradition a heck of a lot with this amendment, because there's going to be debates. Not just maybe among the members themselves, but of the candidates too. The candidates are going to be debating up on stage in front of the delegates, and then that could be something. Or if we have a ranked choice voting system, it's going to be so whether we have the delegates who do that or by a ranked choice voting system, until the delegates basically get, their top two, each delegate gets their list of candidates. They go down the line: first ballot, second ballot, third ballot, fourth ballot, etc. They get their candidates in a row, and after each one is and if their first vote choice is eliminated, then they go to the second, etc. And I'm going to, and this member district is going to be by my estimates, the amounts of delegates at this convention will be 3,326. Each jurisdiction shall have no fewer than one vote at the convention. So, places that will have one vote: Northern Mariana Islands, American Samoa, and the U.S. and the Virgin Islands. Those all will have one vote. Guam will have 2, DC will have 7, and Puerto Rico will have 32. So yeah, that's a major one. the winner of the popular vote wins the presidency. So then the general election is basically just going to be a runoff of the top two candidates, you know. So that goes to a popular vote, and so ultimately it's kind of similar. It's kind of almost as if the Electoral College was you know, I guess as if the Electoral College was one major deal. Okay. Any extra requirements imposed? Okay, and this one's talking about, you know, voting rights. This is a strengthening of voting rights. Any extra requirements imposed on otherwise eligible citizens to vote shall be made available to them at no charge. So basically, if states want to pass a voter ID law, so what they do is they have to make sure that all eligible citizens have access to that type of ID. So based off of Social Security information that they have, tax filings, etc., whatever information is available to them, they have to make sure. They have to, if they don't have an ID on record for them, well then guess what? They have to go to the address of record where all the bills and tax shit is sent, and they have to go, okay. Then they will contact you for an appropriate time to meet, and basically you are essentially guaranteed an ID. One way of doing that would be good for, I think that could be pretty expensive, and so that I think would be a good transitionary deal, but I think the primarily good way to do it is to do it in the public schools. So, hey, you get your voter ID. You get your voter ID, you instead of getting like a school ID at your public schools, you're going to get your actual state ID that is a voter ID. It is ID you get at school is a voter ID. And then maybe it'll say the school you went to, and then that is valid for you to vote. That is a valid ID for you to get to vote. So you are registered to vote, and as soon as you turn 18, you can just use that ID and vote. And that is good. And that's going to be good. And then should you ever quit that school, that ID is going to be valid. Should you ever drop out of school or whatnot, that ID is going to be valid for up to 1 year. And all you need to do, that ID is going to be valid for 1 year. And then all you got to do is you just got to go turn in that ID to DPS or whatever, and they're going to get you up, and they're going to update your information, etc., and see where you're living now, etc., and then they're going to get you a new voter ID, and and you're going to be good to go. So that is a way to, as pretty much a good compromise, and it would also reduce whatever percentage of a voter ID. Now, to people in fiscally conservative states, that's going to say, hey, you can have this voter ID law if you want it, but it's going to cost some extra money so that people can actually, get that ID that they're entitled to because they're citizens of this country so that they can vote. Alright, next. Money's on speech. Individuals may contribute a maximum of $200 per candidate per election. Congress may appropriate funds to be equally distributed in a special currency to the citizenry for additional contribution. So, basically what that means is you're allowed a maximum of $200 from your own personal bank account to contribute to every candidate per election. That's the maximum. Then then this is where we get then the public funding of elections comes in, where however much money Congress wants to appropriate for the funding of campaigns, for campaigns that elections for the election year. That money will be distributed in the form of special tokens, like special currency. Such currency will be evenly distributed amongst the citizenry. That money shall be evenly distributed amongst the citizenry, and then shall be evenly distributed amongst the citizenry, and that they can contribute that to candidates on top of the $200 personal dollars. So, yeah. So, I mean, if billionaires want to contribute, they can, but at a much lower dollar amount, so it's not as, I mean, you're going to need, if you're going to want to maintain the same levels of funding, you're going to need a hell of a lot more support than just billionaires and millionaires that are out there, you know. You're going to need, like, the people behind you, you know. Especially because in those campaign currency dollars, billionaires are getting just as much as the poor people. So, yeah. Alright. So that is just a general idea, and then I know one more that can be added to, I guess, structural reform is potentially, I guess it's kind of electoral reform as well, but it's increasing the number of senators to 150. Basically, 3 senators per state. What that means is each state gets a senatorial election every single 2 years. So, instead of, each state can voice its concern every single election year, and, you know, the senator in that state gets to have an impact in the Senate that election year. So no state can not have an impact in both houses in any given election year. You know what I'm saying? Basically, it helps give every state a say in every election in the Senate, where it wouldn't for one election every 4 years. Or every 6 years, every 6 years a state does not contribute to a senatorial election, which I think is an injustice, and to the 50 states that they don't get to participate in the election every 2 years. Or there's another option. Instead of senators serving 6-year terms, senators serve 4-year terms, and they alternate. So there's 2 senators, and every 2 years one of them is up for election. My opinion, that's another good alternative. So, that was my electoral reform video. Hopefully you guys enjoy it, and if it takes off, maybe, maybe, just maybe, we can fix some of the broken shit with our system. Peace the fuck out. Copyright Amazing Atheist.